Content warning. This episode occasionally deals with topics of homophobia. Viewer discretion is advised.
The source of totalitarianism is the dogmatic attachment to the official word, the lack of laughter, ironic detachment, etc. The excessive commitment to good in itself may be the greatest evil. Real evil is the kind of fanatical dogmatism especially exerted in the name of a supreme good. Consider Mozart's Don Giovanni, the end of the opera, where he is confronted with the following choice. If he confesses his sins, he can achieve salvation and so on. If he persists, he will be damned forever. From this viewpoint of the pleasure principle, the proper thing to do would be to renounce his past. But he does not. He persists in his evil, although he knows that by persisting he will be damned forever. Paradoxically, with his final choice of evil, he acquires the status of an ethical hero, that is, of someone who is guided by the fundamental principles beyond the pleasure principle and not just by the search of pleasure or material gain and so on. Slavoj Žižek, 1989.
In September 1975, Revolutionary Union reorganized itself as a new group, the Revolutionary Communist Party, or RCP. Much like Rue's politics, RCP continued to put primacy on the working class, and creating an image of a future that resembled China in the midst of the Cultural Revolution, with all the people working manual labor jobs to support a society as a whole, their prescribed panacea to all problems.
The prostitutes, drug addicts, homosexuals, and others who are caught up in these things will be re-educated to become productive members of society with working class consciousness. The shame connected with these practices will be taken from the shoulders of these victims, and the guilt will be placed where it belongs, on the bourgeoisie.
They also continued their hyperbolic statements against any liberal reform, including opposing the women's liberation movement as bourgeois. They even opposed the ill-fated Equal Rights Amendment, which would have enshrined equality of women in the US Constitution. Most of all, the organization began to adopt democratic centralism, a form of party discipline and organization used by the Bolsheviks. The concept was that free debate would be allowed until a line or strategy was decided on. Then, every member was required to publicly support the policy, lest they be seen as anti-party. Many sectarian groups use this method of organizing, and per the analysis of Professor Dennis Turish, it creates a high control group, one of the ingredients for a group becoming a cult. The party program also created a strict hierarchy, further entrenched by their version of democratic centralism. Per the book Heavy Radicals, the ranking was as follows.
The individual is subordinate to the party. The minority is subordinate to the majority. The lower level is subordinate to the higher level, and the entire party is subordinate to the Central Committee.
This change in organization was seen by some as little more than rebranding, and an attempt to hide from their prior political failures. Regardless of the name change, the mainstream of Marxism-Leninism and the left writ large rejected the group, mostly from the Boston busing scandal and other actions highlighted previously. The RCP, however, remained undeterred, focusing on pushing new publications and continued labor organizing, which was actually fairly extensive. They formed more front groups, such as the Unemployed Workers Organizing Committee and the National United Workers Organization, and of course, their version of EVAW limped along. They even formed a youth group, the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade. These front groups would attend RCP rallies and were often used as recruitment methods into the larger group. The strategy did not translate to particularly high numbers, with a notable RCP rally during a protest against the US bicentennial celebration being dwarfed by the larger non-RCP one. They also kept close ties to the People's Republic of China, which slowly became untenable as Chinese foreign policy slowly inched towards rapprochement with the US as a bulwark against the USSR. This also included warming relations with infamous dictatorships backed by the US, including the notoriously right-wing Augusto Pinochet regime in Chile. Chinese foreign policy was slowly alienating their activist allies in the US in favor of tangible benefits from uneasy alliances and compromise. This contradiction would eventually come to a head in 1976, when Mao died of a heart attack at age 82. In the ensuing power vacuum, Mao's senior lieutenants during the Cultural Revolution, dubbed the Gang of Four, attempted to entrench themselves into the country's leadership. This was in hopes of continuing continuing the radical policies of the Cultural Revolution. Instead, Hua Guofeng, Mao's legal successor as leader of the Communist Party and now premier of China, had them arrested after securing support within the party bureaucracy, who opposed the Cultural Revolution. Hua even reversed much of the Cultural Revolution's policies. Soon, the Maoist political lines in China's government were replaced by the ideas of Deng Xiaoping, resulting in a turn towards a market economy and economic development. Most Maoist groups were impacted by this series of events, and the RCP was absolutely one of those hit the hardest. By this year, the RCP had effectively been run by a standing committee of 4 people: RU co-founder Liebel Bergman, ex-CPUSA member Mickey Jarvis, former student radical Bill Klingel, and finally, Bob Avakian. Avakian apparently wanted to send a telegram to China, protesting the Gang of Four's arrest. He saw the arrest of the Four as the party succumbing to revisionism, as we've established prior, straying from the true path of Marxism-Leninism as Mao saw it. Bergman and Jarvis saw things differently, supporting the official Chinese line.
I remember that at one point, I was insisting that we couldn't just go along with what had happened in China, that it was our responsibility to analyze this, and if, as I believed, such an analysis led to the conclusion that, in fact, a revisionist coup had taken place, it was our responsibility to oppose it, openly and vigorously. And he shot back.
There you go again. You gotta tell everybody in the world what to do. Let the Chinese people figure out what's right and wrong in their country. It's not up to us to tell them about what's happening in China.
And I replied, yeah, but you're taking a position. It's not a question of taking a position or not taking a position. We'll be taking a position one way or another, whatever we do. You're supporting these people who've come to power and who, as I see it, have pulled off a coup. That's a position. Not opposing this coup is supporting it. So that's a position. Saying China is still socialist is a position of supporting what's happened in China. So don't tell me it's none of our business to take a position. You're taking a position. You just don't want to take a position against this coup because you don't want to admit or face up to what's really happened. Or maybe you like the direction in which these people are taking China, where it's going to be a more business-like society, where they put developing the economy and modernizing the country above everything else, regardless of the character of the economy and of the modernization, and who is served by all this. Maybe you don't care that this is going to be along capitalist lines and with capitalist principles, and will subject the Chinese people to horrendous oppression and exploitation once again under the rule of these bourgeoisie forces and the domination of imperialism. But don't tell me that I'm being arrogant to take a position. You're taking a position too. You're just taking the opposite one. So let's not pretend that's the issue.
Bergman had also been critical of the Cultural Revolution in the past, something Avakian unconditionally supported. This resulted in political deadlock, something that easily can shake a democratic centralist organization. Avakian used this moment to publish a document from the Gang of Four, among his own polemics in favor of them. From this, factionalism broke out, with some from the Midwest and the East Coast accusing Avakian of ultra-leftism and using political tactics divorced from reality. After this, Avakian initiated an internal purge of some of his opponents, calling them a bourgeois headquarters within the party. He equated them to the socialist opposition to Lenin's Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks. He called the opposition literally criminal and demanded that every member in opposition reapply to join the party.
Members who have engaged in factional anti-party activity. These people must re-enlist to assigned comrades or bodies within 1 week as of Thursday, January 12, 1978, or they will be dropped from the membership rolls of the party.
Opposition members had to prove that they were worthy of being in the RCP and to, quote, re-establish their dedication. If I would fathom a guess, this was likely mirroring the self-criticism and struggle sessions popularized by the Cultural Revolution. In China, these basically amounted to public humiliation to bully people into loyalty to the regime and the new society being built. Naturally, people did not want to participate in such a farce. So, in 1978, Bergman and Jarvis, along with a third of the membership, all left. Entire chapters left or bitterly split in two. Some of the exiles formed a small group which folded after a few years. The split was particularly nasty, with crude caricatures being drawn of rival Chinese politicians, and even claims of former comrades wishing death upon each other. Private internal documents were dug up and published. Denunciations were common. At one point, someone wrote Bob Avakian's wife's phone number on a bathroom stall with the message, "Call for a good time." The split was also a wake-up call for many still in VVAW, which was still still under the control of RCP that year. David Klein, an activist in VVAW who was in RCP leadership for years, recalled how people turned on the RCP.
After the split in the RCP, people started examining the shit more closely. I mean, I believe in socialism. I believe that the capitalist system is a system that is corrupt as the communists were, but eventually people have to come to some cooperative system. But you're not a conveyor belt to recruit someone to nirvana in Marxist-Leninist heaven. We spent a lot of time after the RCP thing getting the shit off our shoes.
Front groups started to implode, such as the youth section, which was effectively destroyed, ending RCP's presence on some college campuses for a time. They also ended participation in Chinese support groups, which hollowed out entire chapters of the US-China People's Friendship Association. The hollowed out RCP was now firmly in Avakian's control. The political program only got more wild from there. Avakian started to be hailed as a great leader and theoretician. Members were required to study the truth in his political line against the traitorous revisionists. Revolutionary zeal was paramount, with Avakian claiming,
"It is inevitable that socialism will eventually replace capitalism, and communism will ultimately be achieved in every country, throughout the whole world. Nothing that has happened in China changes this."
As many were involved in union organizing, many members had settled into their jobs, more worried about union efforts than broad organizing. So, labor activism effectively ended, the focus now on extreme revolutionary politics. Members were encouraged to move to hollowed-out chapters in an effort to build up the party. Part of this effort was a new bookstore called Revolution Books as a source of party literature. Membership continued to shrink, but Chairman Bob had a way to drum up the base. Much of their activism would shift towards theatrical protests. In one instance, RCP interrupted a US-China friendship conference, with members shouting slogans in favor of the Gang of Four, such as 5, 5. Chairman Mao makes 5. These culminated in 1979, when Deng Xiaoping was to come on a diplomatic visit to Washington, D.C. Deng, an arch-enemy of Maoism, as promoted by Avakian, was at striking distance. So, the RCP sprung into action, planning a massive protest. The group organized a Committee for a Fitting Welcome, which planned a series of demonstrations. The first of these would be focused at the de facto Chinese embassy. First, red paint was hurled at the outer walls. Later, they smashed the windows with fishing weights. They even burned an effigy of Deng on the embassy steps. Avakian celebrated these efforts, stating at a press conference,
"This kind of thing that happened at the embassy yesterday is an example of a fitting welcome."
Then, on the day of the visit, a rally was held, and Avakian gave a passionate speech to his supporters.
"What they hate and what they fear and what they want to crush is the banner of revolution. The banner of the Revolutionary Communist Party and its revolutionary line. The banner of Mao Zedong. It's the banner of working every day for revolution, of seeing beyond the superficial and down to the essence of what this hellish society and its mad dog prison house that they call democracy is all about. And we gotta hold up that banner. We gotta hold it up today and rally the revolutionary-minded people, all people who look and long for a way out of this madness."
Soon, the party cadre marched on the White House, chanting, "Death, death, death to Deng Xiaoping." Suddenly, they began to charge DC police, hurling things like lit road flares, rusty nails, rocks, glass bottles, and more. The police, taken aback from the unprovoked violence, began to fight off the RCP members with improvised clubs. Reinforcements eventually arrived, partially on horseback. 50 people were injured in the little riot. The official RCP line, however, went a tad differently. In his autobiography, Avakian claims the police started the violence and makes no mention of these improvised armaments. Instead, the party highlighted the violent incident as police brutality, despite almost all other accounts stating that they had initiated the violent clash. They used it as a part of their strategy to entice what Avakian called the, quote, real proletariat, which were mostly the most impoverished and disenfranchised, not the union workers RU/RCP used to support. Soon, paper sales were paramount in the effort to create a revolutionary public opinion. However, 78 members were arrested, including Avakian, who spent 2 days in jail. While in custody, Avakian and 16 other members were charged with felonies for their participation in the violent demonstration. With a possible prison sentence hanging over his and his followers' heads, he had to lead the RCP into the decade to come.